Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 6, Episode 14, One Little Ship. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, we are great. We are awesome. We are a good time. And we are on a new day. Starting, well, now, effective immediately, we will now be coming to you live every Sunday, not Saturday. Just works out better for our schedules. So join us Sunday evenings, and we're actually an hour earlier on Sunday. So don't have to be quite so late. So that should also help out. And if you're wanting to catch a live show, of course, that is. Otherwise, algorithms notwithstanding, you should be able to receive our program via whatever platform you listen to podcasts on at its regularly scheduled time. So,
Yeah.
although I say that acting like I can totally control the time that it releases, which in theory I should be able to, but apparently right now all computers are like, nope, you get what we give you. So
Right.
there you go. Sometimes the episode drops at like 2 p.m., sometimes at 10 p.m., sometimes it drops totally on the wrong day. I don't know why, but I just know that it gets there. So hopefully you're understanding and you're still enjoying at least when it does come out. I promise it's there. I promise it's coming. All right. That's all I'm going to say about that particular issue. And just again to reiterate, Sundays are our new nights for the live show. All right. So as David said, we are here to talk about one little ship. The I don't want to call this a cast-off episode because it does still fit into the overall arc of Deep Space Nine and Season 6, but does it have any true bearing on the rest of the story and season and everything else that we're dealing with? That is something that we will discuss in addition to some other little things that I have come across in this week as well. But before we dive into all that, of course, we like to do our check-in. So, David, how has your week been?
It's been good. It's been 2 weeks since you and I have recorded here.
Mhm.
Last weekend, I had a friend who lives in Kentucky, where I used to live once upon a time. He had come down to Fort Worth for a business meeting. When he was done with the business week, I joined him on Friday up there at the stockyards. I don't know if you've been up to the Fort Worth stockyards, but it's like a like an old traditional area of Fort Worth where they had the cattle runs and they would, do rodeos. So we caught a rodeo Friday night, which was fun. Even though I live in Texas, I've never actually been to a rodeo, so it was fun to actually
I
do
have not
that.
either.
Yeah,
I am not either. Now,
Austin
interesting enough,
is.
though, I have been to the stockyards, but it was not for that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because Austin is like, its own unique little space in Texas, and it doesn't necessarily focus as much on the more Texany aspects of Texas.
Yes.
Um,
Very true.
yeah. But anyway, that was fun. And then on Saturday, we were driving back to Austin, so we went to Waco. He was a fan of Chip and Joanna Gaines, the Magnolia Table folks, and so they have a whole space for Magnolia Table products, like a whole like area of town, like that's just theirs. It's almost like a little park, little amusement park almost. There aren't like rides or anything, but like just for shopping,
Hmm.
their products. The Dr. Pepper Museum is real close by, so we saw that as well. And then on Sunday, we were here in Austin. We just kind of walked around downtown a bit. Went up to the Capitol of Austin, which, fun fact, the Austin Capitol is slightly taller than the U.S. Capitol because we're Texas and everything's bigger in Texas. And then we went, as we were walking downtown, we stumbled into a fun little place on Congress Avenue, down the middle of Austin. That is it's like the Toy Emporium or something they called it, but for like $20, you could go in and see all these classic toys, but they also have classic pinball and classic video games. And
Okay.
so we just hung around there for a bit and just hung out for several days. It'd been a while since we had seen each other, so we just spent several days together. Uh, Before he came down, I finished the book Shogun, which I had mentioned, which was very interesting. It's actually, I mean, the copy I have was 1,300 pages, as I've mentioned, which is obviously pretty long. But that is season one of the show. If you watch the show, they fit all of that into 10 episodes. They did make a number of changes, but not to the overall plot. There are definitely some changes that are important, that like the book is deep more, there's more in the book, frankly. Um, but of course that makes sense. And then of course I started Persepolis Rising, the next Expanse book. We'll finish that this upcoming week. So I imagine next week we can do an After Dark episode and maybe
Mhm. Yeah, that should track with time. Yeah.
perfect. I'm at the part now. I'll just try to give you a little insight, where Holden and Bobby and the crew are underground with Saba, and they're planning
They're
on making
uh-huh.
a hit basically on the enemy ship's communications. They've already got
Uh-huh.
communication relay that can like hear in, but they can't decode anything. So they need the code to decode the signal. They're gonna make that play, but it's we because we can read Commander Singh, who's like the antagonist, we can read his version of events. We know that someone has betrayed them. So I don't know what's going to happen next, but
Okay, so you reached that was a part I was going to bring up to you later on.
yeah,
It's one of my favorite parts because it's in that when they're planning and Clarissa is talking and the guy calls her little girl
yeah,
and she says, "If you call me little girl again, I'll hurt you." And he
yeah,
says, "Is that true?" Or so is that so? And Bobby's like, "No, I need her, so I'll hurt you.
yeah,
I'll beat
yeah,
some respect into you." And I was cracking up
yeah,
reading that,
yeah,
that was a great little moment because I was just like, I totally see this.
yeah,
Older Bobby, still very impressive,
yeah,
very formidable woman towering over this guy and
yeah,
being like, "Yeah, I'll beat you." So it's like, yes, I love it. I
yeah,
absolutely loved it. I literally chuckled when I read that scene. I was like,
yeah,
that's perfect, and especially the way that like if like the way I hear it in my head anyway, Clarissa always being so meek and so timid. And so she gives out like this whole like plan of what they need to do. And then she goes, "Oh, and by the way, if you call me a little girl again, I'll hurt you." And it's like,
right,
it's just enough, like, because we know her.
yeah,
So we know she's a threat. And the
yep,
fact that he's not sizing her up. And then
right,
on top of that, you have Bobby's like, man, either way, you're screwed. Whichever one of them hurts you, it's gonna be bad.
right,
So yeah,
yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
Well,
What I
it's
have
funny.
Go ahead.
It's funny too because Bobby in that sequence, she had already said you can already she, like you're in her thoughts, and she's like she already doesn't like the guy, and then
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
he's causing a problem, and it's like
It's
just
like, just
I
give
didn't
her a
like
reason.
you, yeah,
Right, give
exactly,
her a reason. You're
yeah,
just you're setting the trap, man. She's coming for you. I
yeah,
really did enjoy it. I think I stopped and, like, read it again because I thought it was just so funny.
yeah,
But, the only thing I found missing in it, and I wondered about briefly, was no Amos. I was like, that felt like that would have been a it was like almost an Amos characteristic what
right.
Bobby did there. Like
That's true,
it would have been fitting if Amos had said that, but it
right,
works, and
yeah,
I understand why they made that choice because the whole point of that scene is that, uh, excuse me, is that Bobby is trying to make herself more of a presence because
right,
Holden has been overshadowing her. But we'll get into all that when we
yeah.
actually get to the
Yeah,
book. I don't want to.
I'm at the point where they know something's wrong with
Yeah.
Amos. They know he's kind of upset about something, but they don't know what it is yet. So I'm curious about that because Amos is my favorite character, as I've said before.
And as we've
Um,
talked about before, Amos is a lot of people's favorite character. It's
yeah,
weird how we seem to gravitate towards the sociopath. I think
yeah,
there's something that we should, deeply wrong with us that we should look
yeah,
for, as to why he garners such admiration. I think it's the uncontrolled, the 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 lack of restraint.
yeah,
I think that's what people enjoy the most about him because in our everyday lives, we have to be so like we know what we want to say, we know what we want
right,
to do, but we know we can't do those things because you'll get arrested or HR will come down on you and whatever else. So it's oddly refreshing for a character to speak their mind and then follow through
right.
and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so while we should be admiring Holden, we're all like, Amos, man,
Yeah.
come through, Amos.
Well,
you know.
he's the I mean to use the rodeo analogy, he's the bull in the pen that Holden's just holding back long enough. Like, all right, go for it.
Yeah.
That raw power. But speaking of sociopaths, Avasarala is amazing.
Oh,
That I texted you that the scene
yeah.
when she shows up with Drummer, like I gotta see that on screen because in the books, this is the first time those characters have met. In the show, they mix things up a bit
Yeah.
and combine Drummer's character with the Machio Pa character. Machio Pa is not in this book at all. But Drummer has stepped up in the book version as the current head of the union. But yeah, when Avasarala showed up and said, "Get your act together,"
Mhm.
it was
You're
great.
about to you're about to F it up, and I
Yeah.
know.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Uh,
yes,
and I
I
definitely read. I always read Avasarala in Sheree's
oh, yeah,
voice. And
every time.
yeah.
Every time she has definitely made her stamp on that character. I mean, they all have,
Right.
but there's something about her. I don't know what it is. There's just something about her that I hear it, I see it, I want more of it. I've gone and I've watched other things with her in it, and it doesn't matter what type of character she plays. She's got a great presence.
Right.
Um, yeah, I watched some stuff with her in it, and I feel the same way about her that I feel about. There's an actor. I don't know if you ever watched anything with him in it. Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah.
He was unfortunately he's passed away, but he was
Mhm.
great, great character actor, and
Yeah.
he was so versatile. And he played in so many different things and just gave stellar performances. And I was watching Charlie Wilson's War, and he's got one of the greatest little like monologues in that movie ever. And if you have not seen it, go watch it. It's on Max. I think that's where I watched it.
Okay.
Amazon or Max, one of those.
Sure.
And just a great scene overall. But yeah, I feel the same way about her as I do him. I think they're just great actors who have been just they fly under the radar and then they pop up in a really big way, do something, and then they disappear again.
Hmm.
And it's just like I don't know why they're not doing more
Hmm.
things and have been in more stuff. And then you go and look them up and it's like, oh, they've been in 150 movies. It's like, wait a second.
Right.
Like, how did that happen? But she is definitely just a great presence, great actress. She does fantastic delivery, and no matter again whatever she's in, and I love her. I just can't I can't say enough great things about Sheree Agdashlu. So well, we're obviously off track here, and I don't want to go into this incredible fan dive on her or anybody else, but yeah. Um, real quick, I'll use these last 2 minutes. Recap my week. Nothing major. I hurt myself again, which I realized that I sound quite accident prone. I was going back and doing edits on a lot of our episodes, trying to fix
Oh,
stuff,
no.
and I was listening through, and the number of times I have mentioned that I have been hurt or bruised or sidelined by something was alarming to me because I don't think of myself as like an accident prone person or clumsy or whatever. But I
Right.
swear it was almost like every other episode. I was like, oh, well, this, I had this happen or this. And I'm like, Jesus, man, like, what's happening to you? This was never a problem, but I think it's more it was, but since I was doing so many other things in my past, it didn't bother me as
Right.
much. Like, when you're in high school and college and you're playing sports and you're playing multiple sports and you've got classes and home stuff and whatever else, it just doesn't register the same way that it does when this is kind of all that you're doing to a certain, degree.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so yes, hurt again. Yes, going to the doctor again. This one should be minor. No, it is not workout related. It's more don't walk barefoot, basically. Wear
Mhm.
house shoes.
Mm.
Um, yeah. Um, other than that, everything is fine. Kids fine. School's fine. Work's fine.
Good.
Just trying to make it through to the end of the year and, finally be done paying some stuff off and focus on other things to pay off. So yeah, there we go. Build credit, I guess. That's the best part of it, right? Um, but we're not here to talk about all of those things. We are here to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine and this episode, One Little Ship.
Mhm.
And would you like to give the recap or do you want me to do it?
I think I did the last one right, so yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I'll be really brief just so we can get right to it. This episode is, like I said, it does tie overall into the arc of the fact that the Federation is at war with the Dominion, so Dominion troops abound. As we know, Cisco and company got rid of a whole fleet of Dominion ships that were supposed to be coming through the wormhole. So they have left the Dominion that's already here in the Alpha Quadrant severely depleted of soldiers.
Right.
This is now, as we find out in this episode, this has now led to the Dominion producing Alpha Quadrant based Jem'Hadar soldiers.
Right.
Now, in this episode, we see our crews kind of returning back to Starfleet's original mission, which is scientific exploration. They have come across this anomaly in space that seems to suffer or seems to emit some kind of odd compression effects. So things that go into it end up shrinking down to nearly microscopic size. And then if you bring them out, they return to their normal size. The hope is that this can help develop certain new ways of travel or weapons or something like that, that Worf says, but they need in order, obviously, to study it.
Right.
So a runabout is tasked to the Defiant to go into this thing and to conduct their scientific survey. We have Dax, which is an obvious choice because she's our science officer. We
Hmm.
have O'Brien, again, kind of obvious choice, Mr. Everyday Engineer, and Bashir, who I'm assuming is there to measure the compression effects on life forms, right? Because if they're going to
In
use some kind of
person, he's going to
right.
be both the test subject and the one testing
So
everyone else.
once again, tragic flaw of Starfleet thinking, let's send three highly prized, valuable officers to run some scans and to be subjected to extreme body changes. Not
Right.
the useless ensigns who've done nothing. No, no, no. You're highly decorated, highly skilled, expertly trained officers. Yes, we're
Right.
going to send them. So they send them into the runabout. They get shrunk down to about this big, I believe Julian says, this big,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's them. The runabout is obviously small as well. They're not in the thing but a couple of minutes when all of a sudden the tractor beam that's holding them in place from the Defiant starts to get all rocky, and then it loses contact. Turns out that the Jem'Hadar had used the same anomaly to approach the Defiant undetected, where they launched a surprise attack. This caused the Defiant to lose control of the tractor beam, which let loose of the runabout, and they were unable to defend themselves, which led to the Defiant being taken over by the Jem'Hadar. The Jem'Hadar come on board. They confine most of the officers or the basically the crew to quarters. They round up the senior officers and place them in the mess hall, and they're basically forced to wait. It's at this point that we find out about the different types of Jem'Hadar. The few Gamma Quadrant or OG Jem'Hadar are
Hmm.
basically shadowing, training the Alpha Quadrant Jem'Hadar and
Right.
seeing how they do in their evaluation. There's obviously some tension between them. The Jem'Hadar from the Gamma Quadrant don't really like the Alpha Quadrant ones, and vice versa. And they don't believe they've proven themselves to be ready to supplant what Gamma Quadrant Jem'Hadar there are left.
Right.
The alphas seem to be very alert, very eager, and really kind of rush to get on with things. They don't have the same adherence to protocol and ritual that the gamma
Yeah.
quadrant ones do, and we see this when it's time for their daily dose of Ketracel White, that chemical that keeps them running. Instead of saying the long litany that they normally say before receiving their supply, the guy just cuts them off and is like, "We don't need to do that. We already know, that we're dedicated, so just give it to us." And
Right.
so, there they go. They tell the Vorta that's on their ship that they've got control, but the ship is damaged. The warp engine is offline, and it's going to take them about 5 or 6 hours to get it back online. The Alpha Quadrant first tasks Cisco and company to accelerate this process by working in the engine room to fix the ship. The Gamma Jem'Hadar is entirely way too suspicious,
Hmm.
and he's like, "Don't do that. You should execute them and let our people do it. It may take us longer, but we won't have to worry about them." And Alpha's like, "Yeah, shut up. You're old. Just get out of my way." Cisco, of course, is doing exactly what the Gamma said he was going to be doing. He's scheming on a way to take back the ship or destroy it. They go down to the engine room. It's Cisco, Kira, Worf, and Nog. And Kira is the only one who's actually working to fix the ship. Cisco is trying to take over the control of the ship from the engine room.
Right.
Nog is trying to override the security lockout that they put in place on the bridge so that they can control the ship from the engine room. And Worf is basically going around covering tracks, making sure they can't be
Right.
detected.
Yeah.
They implant a virus into the ship so that in the event that their attempts to take the ship back fail, as soon as the warp engines come online and they go to warp one, the Defiant will blow up.
Yeah.
Um, on the runabout, they slowly make their way back to the Defiant because they've locked onto the transponder signal. They make their way back and discover, lo and behold, that while they thought in theory they would emerge from this thing and return to their normal size, they have not. They're still this big. So now they have to figure out what went wrong. They can't contact the Defiant because all of their systems are pretty much offline. So they decide that the best thing they can do is take the ship, the shuttle, inside the Defiant, and then they'll be able to flag someone down, which would be very effective if a runabout blew up to your face. Yeah, it's a great way to be noticed.
Right.
So they fly the Defiant, not the Defiant, they fly the runabout into the Defiant's exhaust manifold, which, of course, as they're starting up the impulse engines, this thing starts heating up. So now they realize they've got a few minutes to make it through, classic countdown.
Right.
They make it just to the nick of time, of
Yep.
course. And now they're trying to see what's going on and, who they can get to notice them when they realize there are Jem'Hadar on the ship. So
Right.
now they're in hiding. They've surveyed the situation, realize who's working on what and who's doing what, and decide to help them out.
Right.
They make their way to the bridge, and O'Brien and Bashir beam over into a small computer space in order to help with the rerouting process that Nog is working on from engineering.
Right.
That O'Brien says that it's a great idea, but Nog, it will take him weeks to be able to get the correct sequence
Right.
to grant the access that they're looking for. But they can speed that up by going to the bridge and unlocking it there.
Right.
So they're inside the ship in the computer components, which is an interesting scene, and we're going to talk about that. They figure it out. They unlock the necessary sequence so that they can, so that the unlocking process can happen in engineering. Just as that occurs, the Jem'Hadar have finally, put
Had
it
enough.
together that
Yeah.
something has gone on. Something has gone wrong. Um, they realized that the engines have actually been repaired for over an hour, but
Mhm.
Worf was doing a very effective job of covering their tracks, not letting certain things be, announced by the computer system.
Right.
Um, Now they decide basically they don't need them anymore. They're going to kill everybody, and that's when the small runabout makes its grand debut in a big way by firing a photon torpedo and killing the guy, or almost killing him anyway, with a point blank shot.
Right.
This trauma, fights ensue, shots being fired everywhere. Worf snaps the Jem'Hadar's neck. I was like, you should have done that a while ago, but whatever. A bunch of people run around shooting and so forth. Cisco is able to knock out the remaining Jem'Hadar by flooding the ship with anesthetizing gas. Kira erases the virus from the ship, and they round up everybody and basically retake the ship. The Gamma elder, as he's called, is dying on the floor. And he's like, yeah, you were right. I was scheming the whole time. They should have killed
Yep.
me. And
Yep.
the guy's
Like
like,
you said.
well,
Yep.
yeah. And the guy's like, well, victory is life, but then he dies. So
Yeah.
whatever. Um, they then are able to send the runabout back through the anomaly, which it turns out that you have to come out the way you went in order for the resizing to take effect. So they
Mm.
do
I
that,
think it's the other way.
and well, no, because they went into it, and so the thing was you had to reverse your trajectory to come out of it in order for the compression effects to reverse.
I think they had to go through the anomaly completely because the problem was is they were going through it and then they got pulled back by the gravity beam.
They weren't pulled back though. It was supposed to pull them back, but it was cut and they were blown off course. And that's why
Okay.
they couldn't find their way back to the Defiant without the help of the transponder. So
Gotcha.
the Defiant was supposed to hold on to them with the tractor beam so that it could pull them out
Right.
along the same path that they went in. That was the
Okay.
point.
Okay. All right.
So then they're able to find the path that they originally took in and then get pulled out and they return to their size, or so they think. And then we see O'Brien and Bashir in Quarks later on telling the harrowing tale of how they took down the Jem'Hadar when they were just little bitty
Itsy
things.
bitsy little. Yeah.
To which Odo and Quark have a little fun at their expense, insinuating that they haven't quite returned to their full original heights,
Yeah.
and sends them scurrying to sickbay to check it out. Nice little moment between Odo and Quark there, before the end of the episode, and that is essentially it. That's
Yeah.
essentially the episode. A lot of fun, a lot of
Yeah.
intense moments, but yeah. So, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, I thought it was fun. This is basically Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Star Trek edition. I
Hmm.
was a little sad though that some of the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids elements maybe weren't there. Like we never see, except for one instance when they were finally revealed themselves, like when Jadzia's piloting this runabout, and they go up to Worf's face and they see the tiny little versions of them inside. Um, and then of course O'Brien and Bashir are running around inside a motherboard of some sort,
Hmm.
and they are amongst things that are look large. But there was never. I was hoping for a moment where like I wanted the runabout to like bump into Cisco and like reveal itself to Cisco, and then like him communicate with the smaller versions of the characters or something. They didn't do that. They instead were having to like cautiously move through doorways and you know gently bump the door knob to get the door to open, and which made sense. And I imagine would have been very expensive to do scenes like that one I just mentioned of John CS like
Hmm.
waving to Worf. Um, but part of me was a little sad that we didn't have more of that. It would have been fun. Instead, we got moments where like this thing is supposed to be like 4 to 6 inches long, and it's like at one point it's up next near a Jem'Hadar's head. And I'm like, how does he not notice that? Like,
Oh
there's not
yeah,
a
that was
whirring
that was a
noise or
definite. That was a well, and there obviously was, because we could hear it.
yeah,
We could hear the
exactly.
whirring, the engines and everything else,
Right.
and it's almost like he seems to hear it, but well after the fact.
Yeah,
And
and
he's like
like
looking around, like, "What was that?" And it's
right.
like,
You're
you
like
couldn't. You're not
10
human,
seconds
so it's
too
not
late.
like, right. There's not a. Is there a Jem'Hadar version of a fly? Like, I don't
Yeah,
understand that. And you're on a spaceship. There's not
yeah,
going to be a fly. Like, I don't understand what's happening here.
right, exactly.
So, yeah, you hear a weird sound near your ear, you might wanna stop and check that out, because something, I don't know, might blow up, you
Right.
know? But, yeah, he didn't seem all that concerned.
Right, right, exactly. Um, so I like the concept of this episode, but there were definitely some funny like things that that happened to make the episode work. Like as you mentioned, the runabout has 3 senior officers, and the remaining 3 senior officers are on the Defiant. And Cisco opens the episode with his captain's log, being like, "Oh, it's so nice to be able to do just a normal mission without having to worry about the Jim Hadar." Kablooey. It's like,
Right.
bro, you let your guard down, man. Come on.
Yeah,
This should not have been a mission that you like took a little vacation on. You should have sent Worf and maybe Jadzia, and that's
and
it.
it's funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like they bring that up, like Worf, when we see them later on in the mess hall. That's what Worf is upset about. He's like,
Yeah,
I shouldn't have let my guard down. We should have set up additional sensor buoys. We should have,
right,
tasked this. We should have done these things to make sure that we couldn't be ambushed while doing the
right.
mission. Like, he says all those things, which I feel like as an audience, just like
Yeah,
you did, we were all saying the same thing. You're sitting next to an unknown spatial anomaly after you've just fought this harrowing war battle thing to take back your station. You don't think there's a target on your back, Captain? You
yeah,
don't think that your ship isn't, number one on the hit list? They're
right,
looking for you. You're just
right.
gonna go out here and think, oh, we're fine, we're cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd be
uh,
dropping sensor buoys too. I don't want
yeah,
anybody sneaking up on me. Yeah.
exactly. And excuse me. Ooh, I totally get it. We have our main cast, and if anything's gonna happen on the episode, our main cast has to be involved. Even Odo and Quark have to show up at some point at the very end, and they steal the episode. But I'll get to
Oh
them
yeah, they
later.
do. Yeah, they do.
Um, yeah. So there's all that, all of those that kind of silliness, and Kira starts off the episode trying to hold in her laughter. She keeps asking, "So how small are they going to get?" And then uh, you know Worf's like, "I don't know why it's funny they'd be small," and Nog
Nog
is
is
like, "I
right
don't
there.
either."
Yeah, I don't either.
And Nog and Worf are buddy buddy in this episode apparently. Um, and yeah, that's all fun. But and then when the Jim Hadar show up, number two is right the whole time, and you're like, number one's a moron.
Yeah,
He's-
yeah, the whole time, like, it's almost like they wrote him to voice what the
Us.
audience is thinking.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and this has always been a problem that many people have with Star Trek because it's supposed to, like, it always seems like our officers are getting the drop, someone's getting the drop on them, right? And
Hmm.
their overall intellect and cleverness is what gets them out of it, but it's
Right.
that initial duping that, because we as the audience were like, "God, I would never in a million years fall for that." But
Right.
I think that's always been the problem um with Star Trek, and it's the most poorly communicated message of Trek. And it's the fact that we have, in the Star Trek future anyway, they've come so far and
Hmm.
they're so used to dealing with, certain kind of very heady external problems, that the thought of living your life the way that certain things are presented doesn't occur to them.
Right.
Like, again, Worf is a great example here. He is so, oh, we should have done this. We should have had these sensibilities. We should have been looking for this or been aware of a possibility of an ambush. And Cisco's like, nah, no, because to his mind, the threat is over. We handled that. That was in the past. We're moving on.
Hmm.
And Next Generation is full of moments like that where it's just like, why would you go there? Why would you do that thing?
Right.
Because to us it seems inherently dangerous, but for these people who've existed in a future where that kind of danger has never existed for them,
Hmm.
it's a distant part of their past. They consider it their ancient past. So what we're living today, but for them is is 400 years ago. you
Right.
know it doesn't make sense to still be fearful of that thing. That's like us being fearful of, I don't know, name something from 200 or 300 years ago that
Malaria.
I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna. Well, I mean, actually, that's a great example. The flu, for example. The
Yeah.
flu used to wipe people out. Now it's just like you stay in bed a couple of days, drink some
Yeah.
tea,
Yeah.
watch your favorite show, you get over it.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of how it was. That's the equivalent.
Right.
So it makes sense that they don't perceive the threats the same way, because they
Right.
haven't had to live with that kind of thing the same way that the rest of us have.
Right.
So and I just feel like that's one of the poorly translated things in Trek, and why people are always like, "Oh, it's so out of touch." It's not out of touch. They're just different. They live
Right.
in a different timeline. So, and yeah, the Jem'Hadar Gamma Quadrant elder also highlights that in this episode. He's from a different time. He's a
Right.
totally different generation. He sees the threats. He understands how people work, and now there's this new upstart who's like, yeah, you're old, and you're out of touch, and we were born and bred here. We know what this is. There's a complete disconnect between learning from the past and caring for the lesson and so forth. So great
Right.
allegory with these two characters that we see
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've seen enough episodes of Jim Hadar working out, the who's the higher one, who's in charge, who's serving the Vorta correctly, and how the white is important to to the Jim Hadar. Um, but as you were talking just now, I was thinking, we're not talking about Persepolis Rising yet. We're gonna
No.
wait, but this episode actually has a lot in common with that,
Mhm.
because in both of these stories, and this is again kind of a minor spoilers for the book if you guys care about that, but I mean, part of what happens is like the Jim Hadar, they ambush uh, people and they take over the station in the book, or the ship here, and then in the book, I have noticed that it is kind of a slow burn. This
Yeah,
book
that's what I
is
was
not.
telling you earlier. So I was telling
Yes.
you earlier, it's almost like they're doing a new round of world building. But go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the book is a slow burn, and this is a slow burn episode because so much kind of is just plodding along. We have to figure things out, and then they take it back, kind of in a coup d'état type situation. And I haven't got to the part of the book yet where maybe something like that will happen. But at the very least, this episode was like this episode is not as exciting as I would have hoped for, especially because they had the little ship. I was hoping for more, they were seen, but they zipped away and they ran into an air conduit and they zipped through the ship somewhere else because they know the ship better. And the Jem'Hadar are trying to chase down, the little ship, and then like they get out with like little space suits and they have to go over and
They're
try and
even littler.
yeah, and plot around and do something. It was really interesting when Bashir pointed out that oxygen wouldn't fit in their lungs properly, wouldn't fit in their blood properly, because the oxygen molecules that they're currently breathing in the smaller ship fit their lungs, but not normal oxygen molecules, which I thought was actually a fascinating idea. Like,
Yeah, and I like that they paid attention to that particular detail because they're
yeah,
right. They're absolutely right.
right, yeah. But that for me, that was interesting in part because it's like, well, I mean, that must make sense, but like in things like Honey I Shrunk the Kids, they don't address that at all. That's
Not at
part of
all.
the fun of it.
Yeah.
They can do it. So
It's an
start.
absurdity of science with Honey, I
Yeah,
Shrunk the Kids, and
yeah,
also Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. It was the same. They'd have the same problem. The kid would, being that giant size, would breathe so much oxygen.
right.
Anybody around them would die. So, you know,
Oh my goodness, I didn't even
but
think
yeah,
about that. But
yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, it's that's one of the things like what I like about Star Trek, when they do pay attention to those kind of details, because so many things they skip over for the sake of a story. So much fiction writing does that. We
mhm,
know that you can't possibly get the science right on something that is set so far into the future. We have no idea. But there are
right,
certain basic things that I feel like should be addressed, and this is one of them. How would they breathe if they left the runabout? It also explains why it makes sense to keep them on the runabout otherwise. Like you were saying, if they had to get out and walk anywhere, they would have to wear suits to
yeah,
walk out there because the atmosphere wouldn't, even though it's their ship, they wouldn't be able to breathe out
right.
there. It would be interesting to see them like try, if for a brief moment, like if they beamed off and they were just like on a console somewhere, seeing these giant molecules like trying to bump into them, dust particles and stuff, and they're like choking,
Yeah.
and Dax has gotta beam them back before they die, and be like, "What happened? Oh, yeah, I forgot the air. It's different. We gotta adjust.
Yeah.
Do it again." Yeah.
Yeah. Like when they were down in the motherboard and they're talking, um, part of me was like, if they were being so serious about the air molecules being small, well, Jadzia is just gonna send a bunch of air forward in a bubble, and then they're gonna have 20 minutes worth of air. But you know, Bashir is giving O'Brien a hard time, so O'Brien says, "You're coming with me." And I'm like, doesn't that have the amount of air you have to use because you're both sharing it? Like,
Well, one would
I was
one
like,
would think one would think that Jadzia adjusted the air to still
that's what I
give them
said in
both
my
20
head.
minutes,
That's what I said in
but
my head was like, yeah, the amount of air Jadzia needs in the runabout is now less, so she can send more on her on the way. But I just thought it was funny that like we're gonna debate the whole air situation. Like, to be quite frank, other than them mentioning it, I don't think like if they had ignored that point, it would have been fine. There's nothing about
yeah.
the episode that like needed that to be said. So that's for
No,
me. Well, what I'm
you're
getting
right.
at is that a lot of the stuff that happens in this episode is said. There's not a lot of action. Like even like Cisco working at the and Worf and Kira working like they just say stuff technobabble, and they say, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that, but so much of it is just said, and so that means this episode definitely it feels kind of slow.
Yeah.
Which actually, as I'm thinking about that, I remember as I was watching the episode, the commercial breaks were really close together at the front, but then there's like a 13-minute chunk at the very end. Like they put it all there at the end. Um, so
I
yeah,
think that's an adjustment that's been done for streaming purposes. I don't think it was originally
no,
done
they
that way.
they do the breaks at the time that the episode would
Hmm,
have done it originally. So
okay.
yeah,
Well, I like this episode for the sake for what you were talking about there, where so many things are said, like when Kira has to explain to the Jem'Hadar what she's doing to fix the engine, and she starts going through her, Technobabble as it is called.
Yep.
I feel like this is one of those more immersive fan service episodes because this is for that nitpicky nerd who's sitting in the corner somewhere, who's like wondering why they didn't reinitialize the Gyrodyne relays before they started the whatever the like this is for that person, you know.
Right.
And you even have O'Brien doing it when they're in the circuit board, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, well, I'm used to these things, but
This is
I'm
true.
normally used to seeing them from a very different perspective, and so I
Right.
have to, kind of reorient myself." And
Right.
um, yeah, it, I just liked all of those bits. I especially liked how when they're walking around in there and you see all the different colored pillars and stuff, and just taking a moment and realizing, oh, those are the isolinear circuits that we see them playing with all the time, and
Correct.
they're just these little blue or green chips that someone holds up and they'll toss out of the way or whatever, and
Yeah.
you never give it another thought. And
Right.
now the thing is huge, and it's
Right.
like, okay, like right there. And so the attention to detail on the design of that, I really appreciate. Even though we only see like partial pieces and whatever else, but it was still enough that someone somewhere was like, I'm taking this thing and I need to make it the size of a man.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those colorful like blocks they're standing next to. It's the episode 2 of TNG where they have to reassemble the because
Yeah.
Wesley's gone nuts.
That's Data with the isolinear chips, and
Yeah.
he's doing the thing. It's
Like
those chips that he's plugging in. That's what we're
exactly.
looking at in this episode. Just
Yeah.
monstrous.
Yeah. So the fact that those stand out in my mind, and I remember seeing those and being like, they look like dominoes. Like, how is this a giant space shuttle run by domino chips? But whatever. So this
Yeah.
episode, it comes back and you can see that's
Hmm.
still the technology they're using. Yep. So the four-way shunt, I like that. I gotta visualize where it is in my brain, and then we need to go this way. Um, and then they
And
have
I
to
liked.
physically move stuff around. I thought
Hmm.
that was kind of funny because I figured that I mean it made sense because it's a visual action,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure programming is not as easily undone by just moving this cord from here to here. But who cares? We're just
Well, we
having
were
fun.
supposed to be we were supposed to be led to believe that they had done some other things leading up to that part before
True.
finally having to plug and play, basically.
Right.
And because I thought about that too, and I was like, well, wait a second, we've watched them reroute and redivert and whatever else multiple times, and no one's ever had to crack open a case and redo a wire. So how is that done any other time when they're,
Right.
and then but then I thought about it, and again, we have seen them where they have had panels open and they've got their various tools that are setting off sparks and stuff while they're basically soldering something together. And that's what we see them do here. So instead of it being so, massive and hands-on, he's got to, latch the thing into there. They could be using, tweezers and whatever else to do it
Right.
otherwise. And then we
Right.
see O'Brien fire the phaser to kind of, I guess, spot weld it in place,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then it
That was a
works.
funny moment. Yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
also made me wonder about the phaser itself because again, they're in this bubble of oxygen, and it's like, well, what is the phaser? Because
Yeah.
it's
Has
it's
it been
particles,
changed?
right? So
Yeah.
would they have not just blown themselves up in this
Yeah.
moment? But whatever. Let's not think too much about it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, so I guess like I was trying to think of what our next part would be, but I mean, this episode is pretty. It's fun, but it's really self-explanatory. There's not a whole lot of extra stuff here.
Yeah.
Um,
Straightforward episode. Yeah.
yeah, I do. Again, I just wanted to pay a little bit more attention to the difference between the Gamma Quadrant Jem'Hadar and the Alpha Quadrant Jem'Hadar, because this is the
Yeah.
first episode where we have learned that's what happens, and
Right.
we know that this has happened as the Jem'Hadar says to Cisco. I owe my existence to you because if you hadn't eliminated our fleet coming through the wormhole, they never
Hmm.
would have seen a reason to
That's
create
right.
Alpha Quadrant based Jem'Hadar. So it
Right.
kind of gives us, without, I guess, really meaning to, we get a little behind the scenes peek at what's going on in the Dominion. We
Yeah.
understand now why they have not gone back on the offensive and attacking Federation forces per se,
Right.
and why they may be resorting
Reserve.
to these cloak and dagger missions. They're
Right.
testing. They've been growing new soldiers. Now it's time to test new soldiers. So
Right.
we're seeing this kind of slow build of, well, basically Dominion weapons.
Yeah.
They've got to rebuild their fleets, their personnel, because they lost all that when Cisco
Right.
made the deal with the prophets.
Right. Yeah. It really brings to the front though the question of like how do they make more Jem'Hadar? Because we don't see any women, and the only time we've seen a child version was way back in like season
And it
3
was
or
in that
something.
and it was in that tank, that
Yeah.
incubator.
Right. Yeah. So, like, as far as we know, they are strictly artificial life, or at least in their current form. I mean, obviously, they have the white to keep them in check. So they are somehow been designed to need it. Um, but yeah, it's curious how where do they come from? And I'll just mention this while I'm thinking about it. I haven't been watching the new Rings of Power show, but I have listened to people who have watched it and like love to like just make fun of it.
Oh
And
yeah.
apparently, what they did in this season, they they gave this one orc a wife and child. It's like what? Like orcs are supposed to be like this ugly, like they are supposed to be a corrupted form of life. That's the term that's
Yeah,
used.
weren't the orcs corrupted elves?
Something like that, yes. Actually, in the movie The Two Towers, Saruman says that to one of his new orc soldiers, but we see that orc soldier like born out of this gooey
Yeah, they're like
something.
it's like a mud slit. They're pulled out of
Yeah,
it. It's all slimy and gross from the earth.
yeah. It
So
like it
there's some
doesn't
kind
make
of mix of earth and magic and corrupted bloodlines.
yeah, like it's not
You get these
explained like
things.
how is
Yeah.
this thing coming out of the ground, but like it's supposed to be like there's something wrong about this whole thing. So the
Yeah.
Jem'Hadar kind of have a similar thing of like
Feel
where do they come from?
so
Um,
so I have a head canon, I guess we call
oh
it,
yeah, go
theory
for it.
about the Jem'Hadar, and it stems from it is to my the way I think about it, it is part of Trek. If you ever watch Voyager, there is an episode called Distant Origin, and it's all about how there's this alien race, right, that becomes aware of Voyager's existence and starts tracking them down. And they find out that this alien race and the humans on Voyager, they share a common ancestry. And by looking through the various, human databases and stuff, it turns out that these very advanced aliens who have made their home in the Delta Quadrant actually came from Earth. They're dinosaurs. They're descendants of dinosaurs.
Oh,
And so their story is basically that at some point when the dinosaurs were big here on Earth, something happened where a large group of different types of dinosaurs were taken from the Earth and
mm,
deposited in the Delta Quadrant, where they proceeded for the millennias that they, were able to develop and everything else, and they developed their own type of very advanced life.
hmm,
um, my headcanon, especially considering how the way the Jem'Hadar look, is that there was a similar process
mm,
with the Jem'Hadar, but
mm,
before they could reach a point of true sentience and advancement, they were discovered by the Dominion. We know the
right,
Dominion is incredibly old,
right,
and that there's no reason to think that if one group went to the Delta Quadrant, another group couldn't have gone to the Gamma Quadrant. And so
right,
I feel like that's what happened. Somebody deposited some reptilian DNA, dinosaur DNA, on a Gamma Quadrant planet somewhere. And as they were coming along in their development, the Dominion saw in them, just like they saw in the Vorta, a potential of servitude and that they
right,
could be foot soldiers. And so they manipulated them to become their enforcement.
right,
And it explains why the Ketra So White became so important, because without it, they are obedient, obviously, but with it, they are very efficient killing machines.
right,
So yeah, that was what I always thought, was that if they ever really wanted to do a deep dive into where the Jem'Hadar came from, it would be discovered that they actually had an ancient Earth ancestry with some type of dinosaur or whatever. And yeah, that's what
right.
that was.
Yeah, yeah. That would make sense. They were like basically it's the inversion of the what's the rule uh the don't talk to premature civilizations.
The Prime Directive.
There he is, the prime directive. Like they don't have a prime directive. They straight up, like, if you're a advancing civilization, they straight up steal you and
Yeah,
turn you into their own
yeah.
soldiers. Yeah,
That was the story of the Vorta as well, according to Wayun anyway. There was a founder, a changeling who was being hunted, stumbled into this group of primate-like Vorta who had just barely achieved sentience. The Vorta took care of it and nursed it back to health, and as
mhm.
a forever thank you, the
They're now
changeling
the
brought them into,
enforcers.
yeah, they're their politicians basically.
Yeah, the political enforcers, and not like gun
Yeah.
enforcers, but yeah,
But they totally manipulate them. They're genetically modified. They're all clones. They
right,
clone them as necessary. They, like as Wayun says, they have poor eyesight, but they've got great hearing, which you want your diplomats to have great hearing. Hear, everything that's being said around them, about them, to them, so forth and so on. But they don't need to see anything. You don't need to be able to appreciate beauty and aesthetics and so forth. You're a functionary. That's you. We need you to carry out this particular job. And so
right,
they genetically engineered them to only be able to do the task that the founders wanted them to do.
right,
Same thing could have happened to the Jem'Hadar. They were, beginning to approach their own form of sentience and founding a civilization and so forth. And the Jem'Hadar and the founders were like, yeah, that's great and all, but you got a dense musculature, you're covered in bones that look like swords, and you fight really well. So we're going to stop all this culture stuff
mm,
and we're going to make you our fighting force. And then we still see the development of it through their honor code. They still end up having their own sense of self and belief and so forth. It
yeah,
comes, and those things can't be, um I
stopped,
guess, yeah, I was gonna say they can't be stopped. Like you can slow them down a little bit. You might be able to re-divert them,
right,
but any sentient species I feel like would naturally develop some form of those things
hmm,
given time.
yeah,
So
yeah. That presumably makes sense for sure. Yeah, the dynamic between the guy who's number one and number two
the
was,
alpha first
yeah,
and the
the gamma
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 elder,
two.
yes,
Yeah, it was interesting because I mean, the gamma two. I mean, he talks back to number one, the number one guy, the whole time. Like, it is like the whole time he's like, I don't recommend that. You shouldn't do that. This is not. I don't do that. And it's just like, I mean, that's I've never been in the military, but I just figure that, like, that's not how you do it. You don't send the guy who used to be number one, make him number two to someone else, and then like let that number two guy just suck it up. Like, that's not how that would work. He's used to leading.
yeah.
So it's very curious they do it this way. And then
Well,
it
you have
is
to remember that they don't pay. I feel like they don't pay enough attention to those things. Like even when they're talking to the Vorta on the ship, he's very condescending and dismissive of the
mhm,
Gamma Elder.
true.
And he
Yeah.
even goads him a little bit. Oh, is that jealousy I hear in your voice? Like that's,
Yeah.
he's antagonizing the guy instead of making them really work together.
Right. Very true. Um, I mean, he was totally right about what Cisco wanted to do, but he was also kind of dumb because in the middle of the elevator, he's like unburdening himself to Cisco, and Cisco's like, "Want to tell me more?" And he's
Well,
like,
yeah, and he realizes his mistake, and he's like, I've talked too much."
"Yeah,
He got in his feelings a little bit. He said some things, and then he realized it, and he was like, "I've already told you too much." So yeah,
right,
and it's all Cisco needs because in the very next scene where we see any kind of confrontation, when the Alpha first comes down, he's like, "What's taking so long?"
right."
Cisco immediately points the finger. He's like,
Yes, it was a
"This
great
guy right
scene.
here,
Yeah,
right?"
yeah, it was great, and it was perfect because of all that. But the way he did it too, because like literally the guy had just said, "Nope, we need you to switch things up. I know there's something going on. I need you to." And then the reason this is also funny is because the number one guy actually does a terrible job
He's
because he's
terrible.
not
He's absolutely awful.
he's not on top of it. He comes in late to be complaining about why are things not happening. And then when he threatens Cisco, finally, he's like, "I'm going to start killing people one by one," which actually is like that would actually be a good threat, frankly. If I ever needed something from somebody, that would be a strategy I think might work. You know, I'm not going to kill you, but everyone you care about will die one by one until you give me what I
And I'm
want.
gonna make you watch. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And so when he threatens it, and then I feel like the time frame expires and he doesn't back up his threat, I feel like that was. I mean,
Well,
it's Star Trek.
I was
It's
gonna say
Star Trek.
we're on Star Trek time,
I
so
know,
15
but
minutes is really 45 unless it's a
yeah,
countdown. Then 15 minutes is really 6.
yes,
But it
yes,
doesn't matter
exactly.
because the everything always stops at 0 1.
One. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I love a great Galaxy Quest moment. I just love
yes,
that movie so much. Anyway, it always stops at one. Um, but yeah, so I just Cisco going up against number two would have been a fun moment. Like if number two is, I don't know, if maybe he was a little more aggressive. Maybe he was like, I can't let this mission fail because the guy keeps saying to him, isn't it wonderful that this mission will be your final one? Will be you'll retire on a success or something like
hmm
that. Your final mission will be a success. And it would have been fun if at some point he is like, I'm not going to let my last mission be a failure. Screw the hierarchy. Like maybe his white was going out. They only had like he was being punished. The number
yeah,
one guy punishes him and says, "You've been disobeying me. I demote you down to base rank, and you don't get any white." And then he starts kind of going crazy. I don't know. I mean, that I'm just theorizing ways we could have changed the episode up a little bit. Maybe get some more action in there, but yeah, again, my only real critique of this episode is I feel like because of the way they choose to tell it, it has kind of a slowness about it because we're
yeah.
kind of plodding along. A lot of stuff is said, not necessarily shown. Um, but I don't hate it. And yes, how does it tie into the rest of the Star Trek? To Deep Space Nine. Well, ultimately, it doesn't change much, but it does reveal to us that yes, the Jem'Hadar, they're growing new recruits, and they're still a
hmm
threat. And Cisco was kind of dumb to leave the station. Well, maybe not. Maybe the station is safe because the Jem'Hadar don't feel confident trying to retake the station. But
Yeah,
he
I
was a
and I
little dumb
believe that
to.
now Starfleet also sees the value truly in the station. So there's probably a few more ships floating around Deep Space Nine
Right,
now than there were before. Not to mention the Klingons also probably have a permanent task force there as well. So
right,
while it still is always going to be a very tempting target because it does guard the wormhole, um, there's too many ships, and they don't have enough of a force right
right.
now to go back. So.
Right, right, 100%. But we have to before we finish tonight, we have to talk about that final scene in
Oh
Quark's
yeah, we got a
bar.
couple of things I wanted to talk about
Okay, we
before
still
we
got
end
plenty
up.
of stuff. Good,
Yeah.
good, good. Okay, yeah,
So, but yes, the final scene, the scene that steals the show, Odo and Quark,
well, we should
our
start with
favorite.
Jadzia and Dax. Sorry, Worf and Dax first because they
Okay.
they lead into it. I feel like it
Yes.
ties together.
So at the they kind of bookend their story anyway, because as we
Yes.
know, at the very beginning of the episode, Jadzia lets it slip, lets it slip that Worf was supposed to be composing a poem for this
Mhm.
momentous scientific occasion, and she lets everyone know this. To which they almost seem to want to tease Worf, which why you'd want to tease the biggest, strongest one, who obviously has a temper problem in your group. I don't know, but they do. So we know that there's a poem. So then at the end, Worf and Jadzia are sitting down in Quarks, and he begins to read his poem that he wrote, and it's awful. It's awful. There's just no other word for it.
I thought it
And
was great. You shut your
uh, well,
mouth.
Jadzia, tries to encourage him. Oh well, it rhymes. That's
Yeah,
a good start. And Worf is just being classic Worf with the deadpan face in his delivery and everything else before she snatches the pad from him and sees that he hasn't written anything.
yeah,
He hasn't written a word.
yeah, yeah.
So nice little scene between our newlywed couple, you
Yeah.
know.
I like it a lot because I think it's one of the first examples I can think of Worf having any sense of humor. I mean, honestly, that's been his kind of his flaw, right? Is that John Z is always trying to poke him to be, get a sense of
Poking to be
humor,
funny,
and he
right.
finally has one here. He's been writing something. He goes into a little speech before he gives it of like, I don't want any critiques. I want,
This was
I'm
hard.
working on it. Yeah,
Don't
and
you
then
mess with me. I'm
this was
very
this.
sensitive right
Yeah,
now.
this was the story of the little ship with
That
the
took a
big
little trip.
Yeah, that's it. That was it. It was a great. It was actually great. I think that's hilarious. A great little ship. It took a little trip. Um,
It's the beginning of a children's story. That's
yeah,
what it is.
yeah. um,
Um,
and
I like
oh,
them together. I'm
well,
sorry, I do. I like Judzy and Worf together. I
I
just
do. But another scene with Worf is early in the episode when Nog, uh, no, Nog, yeah, Nog is helping him. He sometimes he somehow covers for Worf. I forget what he
Oh,
says.
because they started to lose communication with the shuttle, and so because Cisco's trying to go get it out of Worf
The
about the
poem,
poem,
right,
and
right.
he's starting to explain. And then Nog's like interference increasing from the anomaly,
Yes,
sir,
that's right.
and Worf
Yes, yes,
immediately back. He's
yeah,
like, oh,
yeah,
yep, yep,
yeah.
and
And then
Kira's like, did the
I,
kid just cover for him?
yeah, and then he says, "I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship between the two of them." And
Mhm.
I love that because of course, reference to Casablanca there.
I
So
would have
yeah.
liked it if you would have said, "This is the beginning of an unusual friendship." Just yeah, nah, I'm not ready for you two to be friends yet.
Yeah,
Stop it.
exactly. But of
So,
course, the two characters who we've been trying to get to this whole time who
yes,
steal it at the end, Odo and Quark with Bashir and
the
O'Brien.
frenemies, the best frenemies that we've
Yes,
ever seen.
yes, and they also have a
These
great sense
two,
of humor, as Quark
yes.
points out.
So as we had said before, we see, Odo, or not Odo, but O'Brien and Bashir are telling the harrowing tale of their escape from the Jem'Hadar. They're telling this to Morn and one of the Dabo girls. The Dabo girl, by the way, who also is a body double for Jadzia. So in some of those
Oh,
action scenes that you see, you're actually seeing her.
gotcha.
Um, so anyway, they're telling their story, and Odo walks in and begins to watch both of them very curiously, so much so that he becomes a distraction in their story. And they're like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Are you sure you two have returned to your original heights?" They're like, "Yeah, why?" And he's like, "Well, you just look a few centimeters shorter." And then here comes Quark to back him up. He goes, you do look a little bit more on the petite side. Wasn't gonna say anything, but
Yeah.
and then Odo's like, "Yeah, it's just something a changeling would notice." I'm like, "What a thing to say! Like that's something a changeling would. Why? Why would that be something that you notice?" So what's the explanation there? But whatever. This sends O'Brien and Bashir scurrying, and we see Odo and Quark step down, by the way,
Yeah.
from where
Yeah.
they were standing, and then share a nice little laugh. And Quark's
Yeah.
like, "And they say you don't have a sense of humor."
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
both chuckle. It's great.
Yeah.
Great moment between them.
When you think about it, this episode actually has a lot of funny little moments. Kira starts the episode by laughing about what they're doing, the whole Worf stuff, and then here at the end, the Odo Quark bonding. I mean, we know that they really would have a moment like this because they actually they know each other well, and
Yeah.
so that was great to see them have a little moment together. And that bookend, that really end the episode. Um,
And
yeah,
also, well, real quick with funny moments, we forgot one. It's when they were all on the runabout, but they were on the runabout was in the Defiant, and they were
yeah.
trying to open a door, so they had to key the panel on the side to open it. And
Oh, that's right.
O'Brien tells her,
Yeah.
he's like, "You got to be careful, or else you'll shatter the panel." And she says, "Oh, don't worry, I have a light touch." To which Bashir replies, "Tell that to Worf,"
That's not what
or
Worf has said. Yeah,
not according to Worf is what he
yeah,
says.
yeah.
So it's like,
And she looks at
and
him,
she looks at him like,
and he deadpans it too. He
yes.
looks at, what are you looking at?
And
Yeah,
then when they're traveling up the conduit, and Julian, who has nothing to do but watch, he's inspecting the conduit, and he's like, "Gosh, it's filthy in here, Chief. Don't you
yeah.
guys ever clean up?" And Dax is like, all right, let's not badger the chief." And and O'Brien's like, "Thank you very much." And then O'Brien or Bashir's like, "Yeah, how incredibly small of me." And then they move on. And it's just like
Yeah,
so many moments of them just being little jerks to each other.
yeah. This episode had a lot of little funny moments in it for sure. I'm glad we mentioned that because talking through it, yeah, this episode, it's almost as if that made this episode good, a good episode
Yes.
because it was funny,
Yes,
even if other
they did
elements
the
kind of,
comedy well, right. We
yes,
had a good amount of action, but the comedy was done well in
yes.
this one. It was on topic, it made sense,
On
and it
topic
was
made sense.
clever.
and it was character related. The characters were
Yes,
telling character appropriate jokes to other
yes,
characters. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I enjoyed all of this. So overall, I'm going to say this is a great episode, very entertaining episode.
yeah.
Not necessarily one that you have to watch in any particular order, but yeah, I think this is a fine one.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you have on this particular episode?
I'll just point out that on Wikipedia it says that the screenwriter Renee Echevarria, I don't know if I'm saying
Yeah,
that name right.
Echevarria, I believe is how you
Echevarria.
pronounce it. Yeah,
Apparently, he had wanted to do a story about Little Ship as far back as TNG. So here in
yeah,
season 6, we finally get a Little Ship story. So
yes, yeah. I think he had tried to pitch this, but he had run out of time for some reason and couldn't do it.
yeah. Wonder how they would have
Uh,
done it because the runabouts make more sense, obviously, on Deep Space Nine. TNG doesn't really work with the runabouts nearly as much as Deep Space Nine does.
Right. Well, the runabouts were introduced because of Deep Space Nine. We do see them on Next Generation, but they start appearing in season 6, which is when this show was beginning its overlap. So that's what makes sense there.
Right.
This episode is also fun to note. This episode is Colm Meaney, who plays Chief O'Brien. This is one of his favorite episodes.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah.
Nice.
So there you go. The other thing I wanted to talk about really quick before we end our show. I spend a lot of time going over things with Star Trek, um, and there's a lot of content out there. YouTube is full of people who do these like analysis videos of the ships and the missions and all kinds of stuff, right? So
Uh-huh.
I found one recently that I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to get your take on it. And it's something that I didn't realize. Um, it made a lot of sense, and it sat with me for a while because it's something I had thought about off and on for years, and it's the Enterprise D. Since we don't talk about next gen that much, I figure we take a little bit of time right now and just talk about it, and in particular talk about the Galaxy class starship. One
May I?
thing that is, go ahead.
May I suggest if we're gonna do an After Dark episode next week, and we're gonna focus on the Expanse a little bit, but not as much because we don't have a show to operate on. Is this a question? I'm not. I don't want to stop you, but maybe is this a teaser for the After Dark
Oh,
episode?
we could do that.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, we can do that. So,
Yeah.
for those, yeah, when you
I don't. I
listen to
still want to
this,
have the conversation. Don't get me
yes.
wrong.
Well, yes, and we can actually do some extra things with it. But basically, to to get us set up for that, if you are so inclined, just give a thought to the purpose of the Enterprise D, what we see in the show versus what could have been the true purpose for a ship of that size and that power magnitude. Okay, that's
Okay.
pretty much what that's going to cover. So we will talk about that when we do our After Dark, when we're talking about the Expanse. We'll probably do that part first. That way we can devote the majority of our time to the Expanse and everything else. But that's
Right.
what it's going to be about. Okay.
Gotcha.
So that'll be it. Yeah, that'll be a great way to end this one now. Nice little teaser for next week. So yeah, come back next week. It'll be our After Dark special for the Expanse and some kind of expanded universe Trek stuff. No new news when it comes to new Treks of, oh, I'm sorry, this there is one thing. The final season of Lower Decks premieres on October 24th. So that is not this week, but next week. So you got a little time to get your subscriptions all set up on
I was
Paramount
gonna say I
Plus.
saw a little
Yeah,
advertisement for Lower Decks this week, and I was gonna say I think I saw
now,
something.
yeah, it is supposedly the final season. Now, there is a campaign right now that you can sign to save Lower Decks. I saw the posting on Reddit. I saw that there's a link on the StarTrek.com website. All the actors have given little interviews, and there's links to all those things about trying to save the show. I would love it if they did. I do know that Paramount apparently is having a lot of issues right now. And people have been kind of laughing at them because while they've been experiencing, in particular, financial issues, they have seemingly sold off or at least parsed the rights out on a lot of their kind of like cash cow products. One of those being Star Trek. So, like, Prodigy is no longer on Paramount.
Paramount.
Lower Decks is canceling. Strange New Worlds is delayed for some reason, and then they've got their little movies and whatever else. So it's like the things that were making them money, they've messed up in somehow some form or fashion. So if you want to try to save Lower Decks, you can go to Reddit, find it there. You can go to Paramount Plus and or Paramount.com, find it there. You can go to StarTrek.com and find the petition there as well. So take a look and hopefully it works because I mean the show it's great. It's really funny. It's really clever. They have a lot of great callbacks. I don't know why they would be canceling it, but there you go. Well, I think that will do it for us for tonight and this episode. Again, come back for us Sunday at 9 o'clock or nine, yeah, 9 o'clock, and join us. All right. So we will see you then. So until next Sunday, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.